I want to welcome you to this public policy community meeting on marijuana. I am your Congressman, Jared Huffman, and it's great to be with you here in Southern Humboldt. Thank you for once again providing the congressional weather. It's a gorgeous day, and it's been a fascinating and productive day for those of us that have been out in the community, meeting with stakeholders, hearing from different perspectives. There is so much accumulated wisdom and so many lessons that this part of California has to offer and to inform this important issue. And so that's why I wanted to invite my friend and our Lieutenant Governor, Gavin Newsom, to come right to Humboldt County and hear from all of you. And he has been very generous with his time. He came in last evening, and we started the discussion of these issues over dinner, and we have not stopped. Continued well through the morning with some great visits out in the field. We had a stakeholder forum a little bit earlier today, and Gavin has been around the state of California talking with all sorts of different folks about this challenge and opportunity of moving beyond marijuana prohibition, probably through an initiative on the 2016 ballot. And he's shown terrific leadership on that issue. But I suspect that he's heard things here in Humboldt County that he didn't hear in other places. And that's exactly why we wanted to make sure that he was here. He'll hear more from all of you after our panel discussion in a few moments. But I wanted to give you a chance to welcome Gavin Newsom to Humboldt County. I want to give him a chance to say some opening comment.
Thank you, Congressman. Thank you, guys. Well, now I just want to leave and soak that in. I like this. You can keep applauding. I'm Lieutenant Governor. I need that, People, they forget about us. Thank you, Congressman. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for taking so much time and energy to put together what's been a remarkably successful 26 or so hours and counting. It is wonderful to be up here. We've had the process, I've had the opportunity to participate since October of 2013 to chair a task force, a work group with 21 individuals that come from every conceivable walk of life and background. Folks that are very supportive of moving forward with a regime to tax and regulate marijuana for adults, those that are vehemently opposed, folks that are advocates for youth and are scared to death about the message this sends and what's going to happen to our young people as it relates to the concerns that big tobacco is going to come in and become big marijuana. They're concerned about edibles, and they think that's the scourge that we have to address as people are out there trying to promote edibles to our children. They're worried about advertising to our kids. I have other folks on this work group that are in law enforcement that say, are you kidding? We got problems enough with alcohol and DUIs, and now you're introducing something that could be radically more problematic, and we don't even know how to test for DUIs. I worry about public safety. And we have folks there that just say, hey, calm down. We got this. Heck, we've got a legalized market. It's called medical market. We know not every single person that enters into it is sick. We know that it's not particularly well regulated. Maybe we can get our arms around a regulatory regime. We actually can improve the conditions. And then folks kept telling me, well, that's great. You had those conversations in L.A. and San Francisco and Oakland, and you'll be out in Fresno, but you haven't been up to Humboldt. And you don't know anything. And so it's in that spirit that I'm here. So my mom used to say, seek first to understand, then to be understood. And so I'm here, not on a listening tour, because that sounds almost rote and cliche. It must poll well. I can't stand that. It's kind of, I'm looking for leaders. It's a leadership tour. We got challenges as it relates to the status quo, and we have an opportunity to learn from the status quo and move in a new direction. That requires your leadership. It requires your stewardship. And so I'm just grateful for the opportunity to take a lot of notes and try to incorporate this into a final report that will come out in about 60 days that we hope will inform the initiative process, which, as we speak, is being put together, and help us organize an initiative that will respect your voice and your concerns today. So, Jared, thank you again for all your hard work, and thanks for inviting me.
So, folks, we're going to begin a panel discussion, and I'm going to ask the panelists to sort of introduce themselves as they go, but you're going to hear a number of perspectives that'll get us started, and then we will take it to the public question and answer time. In terms of the logistics of that, I want to just tell you how we're going to handle it. We're going to have a microphone over in this corner of the room, and what I will do is periodically ask for some hands for folks that want to ask a question or make a statement, and then I will ask maybe 4 or 5 of you to come over and get in line, and we'll just kind of try to do that every few minutes and keep that line moving, and that'll, I hope, enable us to cover a lot of ground. Of course, the amount of ground we cover depends entirely on those who get the microphone in their hand and exercise that discretion. So please tell us what you think we need to know. If you have a question, ask the question. Long speeches that precede questions sometimes aren't necessary. And if you do that, you'll respect your fellow member of the public that wants to maybe get their question asked, and you'll allow us to cover as much ground as possible. So I'm going to start us off by handing the microphone to your terrific state assemblyman who's doing great work on this issue in Sacramento. He'll tell you a little bit about what he's working on.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you to Congressman Huffman for putting this together today, and having the Lieutenant Governor here is really, really beneficial to all of us. The biggest thing that I've been trying to do in Sacramento is to get my colleagues to engage on this issue, and it is really, really difficult. There's still a lot of people who just don't want to talk about it. And so we've been working on an environmental protection bill. I'm calling it the Marijuana Watershed Protection Act. It's AB 243. We were fortunate enough to get that out of appropriations yesterday. It'll move to the floor of the Assembly this week for a vote, and then move to the Senate. Now, it's got a lot of work to do on it, but the important part about this is it's talking about the environmental challenges that we're facing and potential solutions. And how do we begin to create a framework around medical marijuana that we can then potentially transfer when the vote for legalization actually occurs? So it's absolutely critical from my perspective that we continue to have the conversations to get as many of my colleagues engaged in this and as many of the stakeholders engaged so that we can have a meaningful discussion. We can end up with something that really works for us here in California, and especially for the folks here in Humboldt County. So thank you very much for being here. I'm going to pass this over to Keith.
We are. All right. Good afternoon. My name is Keith Humphreys. I'm a professor of psychiatry at Stanford University, and I work with the state of Washington after they legalized on their regulatory framework. And been very pleased to get a chance to work on the commission with the Lieutenant Governor and Paul here and many other outstanding experts. Your input is absolutely crucial. And one of the things that is clear about marijuana policy, in fact, policy in general, is there are some hard choices to be made. There's trade-offs to be made. There is not a perfect policy. For every person, for example, who's excited that prices might be lower, there's someone else who's scared they might be lower. People have different feelings about taxation. Everyone has different ideas about what to spend any revenue on. And so the only way to handle that in a democracy is to do what we're doing right now, which is engage in this kind of dialogue. So I'm grateful for the tour we had today, grateful for your presence here. I also want to say that if you don't get a chance to say what you want today, there is a website, safeandsmartpolicy.org. You can see all the reports, you can see who's on the commission, what we're doing, and you can write in and say anything you want to say. So thank you.
Terrific, thank you. There, are we still live? Are you on? There we are. All right, I suspect a lot of people in this room remember the former district attorney, Paul Gallegos, who's been moonlighting on a Blue Ribbon Commission lately. So welcome, Paul.
Thank you very much, Paul Gallegos. Many of you know me, but I do want to thank Congressman Huffman, Assemblyman Jim Wood, and Gavin Newsom. My experience in politics and in life is courage is in short supply. And there's courage is in short supply, and they certainly have manifested an extreme amount of courage to take this issue on. We are in ground zero. We know the importance of this to our communities at every level. But they are in the areas where they're hearing the other side of the voice, and they have the courage to do this for us and for the state, and I appreciate it. So thank you very much.
Sheriff Downey, Sheriff Mike Downey of Humboldt County.
Thank you. You know, we had a great discussion this morning, and Assemblyman Wood, I appreciate what you just had to say. I will say that I have found that both Senator McGuire and Assemblyman Wood have become very engaged in this issue. But he brought up something very interesting. We have a problem, and that is a legislature that does not want to engage in this issue. I've been fighting that for years. We have something called Prop 215, which I think was poorly written personally, but at the state level, no one wants to even address it. How can we go 19 years with the legislation that has been passed, but yet no one wants to deal with it? There has to be some type of regulation of start with any industry, and I feel like we have a paralyzed approach to this. And my hope out of this is that we can come up with some kind of regulatory scheme that fits everybody's needs and give me some definition as to what is legal and what is not legal. So again, thank you for this forum. I think it's going to be good. Thanks.
Thank you, Sheriff. Morad Gabriel will speak to you from the perspective of someone who's out in the field working on the environmental contamination challenge of this.
Yes. Thank you so much for this invitation and also the well-attended audience here. As Congressman mentioned, that's basically our forte of our research is trespass marijuana cultivation and the impacts. But one thing that I stress is we are probably all in consensus here that trespass marijuana cultivation is not acceptable. But but one issue I do want folks to have in the forefront is having some level of support to not just remedy this, but remediate and restore these trespass cultivation sites back to their former pristine habitat. And so therefore we ask, as an ecologist, we ask for that type of level of support so that we can go ahead and remedy these egregious clandestine acts on our public lands.
We'll go next to Luke Bruner, who has been a terrific host to us and part of our agenda earlier today. And I just want to say to Luke and others we've met with, it takes a lot of guts, I think, given the gray area of this industry right now and the uncertainty and the risk, to have a bunch of public officials, state and federal, and to have law enforcement come in and talk with you on site about these issues. We appreciate it very much. I think it's been very informative for us, and we'll give you a chance to speak a few words to the group.
My name is Luke Bruner, and I'm with California Cannabis Voice Humboldt, the voice of the cultivation community here in Humboldt County. The courage, the real courage is on your end. You know, we have something at stake. We have our community at stake, but you folks, you represent all the interests. Our issue is so important, and yet in the great state of California, it is one issue among many, and you folks had the courage to make the call, to do the thing that nobody else would do and say, I'm going to get involved with this, take it by the horn, and find the people that want to do the right thing, and they're here in Humboldt County for you, sir.
All right. Well, last and certainly not least, John Corbett from the North Coast Regional Water Board.
Hi, hello. First, it may be a broken record, but I want to thank our congressman for the courage and the leadership of calling this, Assemblyman Woods, and then we got some star power in Gavin Newsom here. And so that's very, very nice, and I appreciate his efforts to come in here. I'm going to be super brief. Regional Water Quality Control Board is going to be regulating water quality only. We will be regulating all marijuana. Oh, is this better? Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, we're going to have proposed to adopt regulations in August. It will be water quality only, and we don't care whether it's medical or non-medical marijuana. I did want to say one thing conceptually, and I don't fault anyone for trying to get adequate money in their budgets, but this whole thing has to be affordable, and if the price is too high compared to, people won't sign up. And so we have to get the right balance here of where there's the incentive to sign up is greater than having to deal with the state of California regulatory process. So we're trying to do something in tiers to try and deal with that, and we're trying to keep our fines and schedules and payments for fees low so that we can get people the incentive to sign up. And we think the large majority of growers are going to do just fine. And the ones that aren't, we just need them to comply with water quality law. Thank you very much.
All right, so there you go. You've got a lot of important perspectives and some expertise and some policymakers here on our panel. We want to now move this to a discussion with all of you. So as you think about what you want to say, I guess I would just ask that you include what you want us to do from our perspective. So I've got to go back to Washington. I know there are several specific things that I need to do there on banking and on tax policy and on the scheduling under the Controlled Substances Act, on research. You may have other ideas for me. Very valuable for me to hear from you. By the same token, Lieutenant Governor Newsom is finalizing a report that's going to be hugely consequential for purposes of the ballot initiative next year. So tell him what you think he needs to know, what you think he needs to do, and of course Assemblymember Wood is in the trenches in Sacramento and wants that same kind of feedback and guidance, and we're here to answer questions that you may have. So who can we start with? Let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If you folks could come right over here and line up. And as you're doing that, I just want to acknowledge some county supervisors that are here and deserve your support. Estelle Fennell from Humboldt County Board of Supervisors. Her colleague from Arcata, Mark Lovelace. Where's Mark? There he is. All right. From the Trinity side of the Emerald Triangle, Judy Morris on the Trinity Board of Supervisors. And Mendocino County Supervisor John McCown is with us as well. So, all right, folks, so please state your name and take it away. Try to be as concise as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Ken Hammock, and thank you for being here. It's about bravery, as it's been said before, but it's also about trust. Trust that we're going to do the right thing. I'm the local futurist. I've been doing this for 4 years only because my daughter chose Humboldt State University to go to school, and I got very interested in the issue, so I've worked with a number of different groups to think this thing through. So there's a lot of really good conversations that I think are resulting in the panel here today. The only thing I ask is the cement is about ready to get poured, and when it gets poured, it becomes concrete, and you can't break that up for a long, long time. Small farmers up here, I've learned, and I didn't know, I'm not from the area, but I have been recently, and I've learned that they have a lot of knowledge, models of how to do agriculture. There's a lot of cutting-edge stuff in terms of how do you use water and how you treat the environment. And there's very important lessons for other pieces of agriculture, not only across the country, but the world. So I think that there's a way of writing, legislating, putting into an initiative, a process that includes a lot of the knowledge up here. I call it Silicon Valley of the North, for other reasons. But there's amazing amount of brain trust up here that can be used, and if we don't, it's going to be a great loss. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm Susan Tibbin, and my two questions are addressed to any one of the panel. Number one, would you share with the audience what kinds of differentiation you're hoping for in terms of medical and recreational? And number two, what might be being worked on in terms of transportation? Thank you.
All right, there we go. Okay. It's interesting, in Washington, they had a medical system prior to the recreational system that made our medical system look really rigorous. And the legislature has folded them both together. And the reason for that is that when you have a huge number of recreational users in an untaxed medical market, there's no way to persuade them to move into once you have a legal recreational market. So the challenge of an unregulated medical market, as was said, we've never really regulated medical marijuana very well in this state, is intimately connected to what the recreational market is like, because a legal recreational market really can't work if we don't somehow solve that problem. Now, there's a bill in the legislature that could potentially make movement on it. If that does not happen, then I suspect, I'm not writing the initiative, I should make that clear, our commission's not writing the initiative ourselves. I suspect that will be in the initiative, is some way of reconciling those two things. That's what I know.
Transportation. By that, do you mean trafficking? Oh, you're talking about driving under the influence? Yeah. Who wants to speak?
Yeah, no, I mean, so our first forum was around public safety in Los Angeles. This question came up, and I had some of the top folks processing this. No one has an answer to that yet. But we have to figure out the best approach to deal with that. And I imagine, Sheriff, that's from an enforcement perspective, and I appreciate all your comments is about clarity, so your team understands where to go. I'm curious, your concerns around the transportation question from an enforcement perspective.
Well, I think it comes down to a quantitative approach. How much are you transporting? Can you clearly show that it is for recreational use or legitimate use? Those are the things we'd have to look at, because you're totally correct. I mean, under Prop 215, transportation is illegal. I don't care if you're taking just a little bit to your friend who needs it, it's still illegal to transport. So that is a high hurdle. It's not too high, but it is a hurdle that has to be met to clarify what that means.
My name is Robert Sutherland, and I'm here with a group called the Humboldt-Mendocino Marijuana Advocacy Project. And thank you for coming to the center, past and present, of the historical marijuana industry. You're in a rush, rightfully, to correct some enormous problems that we all know exist. Don't stomp on the disabled users. Some of the proposed legislation does that. Secondly, I want to say, if you want respect and collaboration with the laws, do not give special treatment for financial or political interest groups. You will lose respect with that. Thirdly, I just want to say that for representatives from this area, please look in their eyes and see if there's dollar signs first. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I am Brother Newcomb from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I am here representing the patients, specifically HIV/AIDS patients, cancer patients, and whatnot. And I have been working on the Jack Herrera California Cannabis Hemp Initiative for the last year and a half, gathering grassroots support with approximately 1.5 million people presently ready to sign their initiative. Signature gathering begins September 10th. My question has been through the whole process as I have been talking to people all the way up through the Congress and whatnot, and even sent you a letter, Mr. Lieutenant Governor Newsom, requesting that you basically take the banner and run with this, because I am a priest, not a politician. And I am trying to help the patients. Now, what the patients want is the CBD oil so that they can effectively treat themselves of the cancer that they have, that they cannot get treatment in the hospitals because medical insurance won't allow it. Yada, yada won't allow it. So they're making themselves into, they are making themselves into criminals by trying to save their own lives. Right? Now the issue is Schedule 1. The issue is that DEA continues to enforce that regardless of the state's propositions, legislatures, in defiance. Right? You have the people supporting you to push this through.
Brother, let's get to the question if we can, because I think we understand the problem.
What are we going to do for the patients to bring them out of being a criminal for treating, that which is killing them, a chronic illness, into the care and light that we want them to be? Proposition 215 was put in as a reaction to the HIV/AIDS epidemic. I know, I was part of that. And I am a patient.
Thank you for your question. So I'll just say that from the federal scheduling side of that, there is legislation introduced every year. I'm a co-sponsor to amend the Controlled Substances Act to change that. We're not quite there yet in the United States Congress, but each year, with each different vote on this subject, we chip away at this antiquated policy wall in Washington. And we'll keep doing that. And I don't know if folks at the state level want to speak to the Prop 215 aspects of your question, but my guess is that we're all trying to just move this thing way past Prop 215. Okay, thank you.
Hello, my name's Steve Geeter. I'm a local business owner, a community member, an activist, and I could go on and on about me. But I came here today to listen to what's going on and be a part of the change, involved locally with California Cannabis Voice and Emerald Growers Association. But there's a couple things I just wanted to ask. One was, please help keep Humboldt green. I mean, there's a lot of dollar signs we continue to talk about, and there's a lot of issues that are on the table. But sustainability is key. I think we know that, but it's we don't want it to get mentioned too many times so then we've forgotten about sustainability. So I just wanted to mention that. But another piece I wanted to mention and ask of everyone involved here is that I think if we look at marijuana and cannabis, we have two words. They have two distinctly different meanings. And as long as I can remember, marijuana is a derogatory term based in racism. So I would just ask you to do some research into that. And it's really important. It's really important because I see folks nod their heads at the table and say, oh yeah, I hear you. But I also heard everyone on the table almost say the word marijuana today. That doesn't show unity to me. People on two different sides of this, if you look at what's going on, all the activists and people in the cannabis business don't use the word marijuana. There's a reason for that. I just ask you to respect that and understand that as we write these bills and as we write all this, like Ken said earlier, things are locked in stone. Marijuana was locked in stone in 1937. That's been a war on drugs. It's not a war on drugs, or we wouldn't be here doing this anymore. The war on drugs is over. Drop marijuana. Just drop the word, please. That's all I'm asking.
It's helpful to hear that perspective that the word marijuana is perceived as pejorative. I don't think we're yet at a point of consensus on that, because we have the Marijuana Policy Project, which is absolutely advocating on these issues, and it may be that the community settles on one particular word or another, and we'll certainly take that point under consideration. Okay. Yeah, please. Oh, yes. Who's next? Let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we'll keep getting around to folks. So come on up, the 5 that I just pointed to. All right.
Ready? Oh, my name is Eric Riccio, and being that cannabis concentrates are highly recognized in the industry, and they're sold in almost every dispensary in the state of California, it still remains illegal to manufacture them. And, okay, in addition to that, being that it's illegal, people do it in a clandestine fashion and also dump their refuse all over the roads out in the hills in Humboldt County. And if there's anything that really pisses me off when I'm driving through the hills, is seeing a pile of empty butane cans. Now, so that people are going to do this. It's recognized in both recreational and the medical cannabis industry, and it is also legal to produce these substances in the state of Oregon, Colorado, and Washington. So I really think something needs to be done to move forward to have the state-approved machines, the state-approved areas where this stuff is supposed to be done, places where to recycle the unused gas instead of letting it out into the atmosphere, and last but not least, people blowing themselves up. Because it's driven by cash, and people get into this and they don't have any idea what they're getting into or understand the mechanics into producing these substances safely. So, but they want to do it because, hey, there's a dollar sign at the end of the rainbow. But I think it really needs to be regulated, because as long as it's not, there's going to be places up in the hills blowing up and crap littered all over the county. And I just think there's a right way about going about it, and that's one of the things I know it's it's one of the bigger hurdles, And
Speak to that piece of it. Is that being looked at?
We haven't. No, this is exactly why we're here. Thank you. It's very, very helpful. Yeah, I was not aware. Love it. You already contacted us directly. We're good.
All right. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Douglas Furr, and I'm having kind of a Barack Obama moment. Like, I never would have expected a black American elected president in my lifetime. I would never have expected the lieutenant governor to be here talking about these issues in my lifetime. Thank you. So, and thank you, Jared Huffman, for taking this leadership, which I've encouraged you to do. My question is simple, and that is, we have an area of the state, and actually distributed throughout the state, counties which are economically dependent upon the cultivation of this particular substance. If legislation or initiatives are not mindful of the fact that these economies need to be protected, that people in these regions have figured out a way to bootstrap and to solve the problem of economic rural development, which is a sticky problem all over the world, to bring green money into an area that's a resource area. We've figured that out. And if that isn't acknowledged and honored in anything that goes forward, you're going to have depressed, deteriorated economies, social dislocation. The logging boom and bust is going to look pale in comparison. So please acknowledge that and take that into account. Thank you.
My name is Jonathan Baker. I'm a second-generation cannabis farmer, and I wanted to first thank you guys for coming here and be hearing us out, because I feel that we're all sitting here looking at what's going on in Colorado, Washington, and a lot of these places, and we're all gearing up to be prepared to live our lives like we have been living, though we are excited about what the future can be. I feel for too long, a lot of the big industry, it looks like big industry is taking over everything, and that the cannabis for California and the United States for a long time has been produced by many, many, many small growers, and lots of us are families with lots of kids that maybe had hardships in other areas and moved to different things. And I just want you guys to realize that everyone here is here because we do not want big industry to be the only people there. We do not want 30 to 50 permits for the entire state. What about There is 4,000 or more outdoor farms alone in this county, let alone the indoor production going on and the just all the stories of where people have been able to go in their lives because of this industry. I just want to urge you guys to look at making it accessible to people like me. I just turned 25 years old. I don't have millions of dollars, and I mean, I can go down to Silicon Valley and try to pitch myself to some investors, but a lot of the knowledge has been created up in these hills, and a lot of the strains and all of this, and we just do not want to see our livelihood stolen from us. So again, I appreciate you guys' time for coming and listening to us, and please, when the legislation comes out, make it viable for all of us to be able to enter it, because I think California can set a template for the rest of the nation and how it can be done so that it's fair to everybody, because I grew up as an organic produce farmer, and I just see it as agriculture, and it's just another plant, and we need to look past it.
Hi, my name is Cinnamon Paula, and I am a mom here locally. I'm engaged in the community in many different ways and organizations. I currently work at the Chamber of Commerce, and so I have an opportunity to have discussions with not only business people and those in town, but our entire membership, as well as tourists that come through on a daily basis. And I've had the most interesting of information and conversations come through that door. So first I have a statement, and then I have a question. My statement is that I grew up in Sonoma County, and I watched Sonoma County turn from rolling beautiful hills and countrysides to nothing but vineyards, and I really, really left there because I couldn't deal with it. Please don't let Humboldt do that. My question now is about policy and whether legalization recreationally in California is looking towards maybe modeling more after Washington or more after Colorado, because in Washington, it's Washingtonians only, grown in Washington, used by Washington people. There's a very stringent guidelines. In Colorado, it's very much kind of catered to tourism and bringing other people in to enjoy their product as well. And I'm just wondering which way California is leading on that spectrum, because it really changes how some of these people that are starting up businesses currently are going to proceed in the future.
That's a very good point. I think the thing to remember about tourism is that there's a first mover advantage in this market. If marijuana were legal in California, why would you go to Colorado, right? And you'd rather go here. So I don't think the tourism thing is going to be as important when it's not, when marijuana is only, a mile away for most people. Whether the initiative writers will model us more after Washington or Colorado, I don't know. Washington and Colorado have really different political cultures. Washington has a very strong civil service, a real sense of like good government kind of sensibility. Colorado's a little more of a cowboy libertarian model, and the laws reflect those two things. What I would be doing, and what we're doing, is just monitoring what's happening in those states, and then saying what do we want to have happen in our state
they lean towards welcoming others into our state to partake. Is the conversations that I've had lean towards that.
If I may just briefly, I think there is a recognition in the commission and here in the state of California that marijuana or cannabis is an immense profit generator for Humboldt County and the state of California. So I think what we're trying to do is come up with an idea that doesn't fit Colorado or Oregon, but what fits California, the people in California, and the people in our communities.
Hi, my name is Franchi. I'm going to give you an outsider view and maybe a solution. As an outsider, California is a world economy. You cannot be like Colorado, Washington, or Oregon. You're a world agricultural producer. Here it's going to be very different. And you have literally a solution that has been tested and made in 160 years, a multi-billion dollars that has been copied the world over. That's the wine industry. In 1855, they reinvented the game. They protected all their growers. The only thing they ask for their grower is to be organic, to protect their land. And the first things you should protect, it's your land, because it's so unique. And those people are so unique, and you have such a genetic, that's a terroir in the wine industry. If you work it well, Mendocino will be like Champagne. Humboldt will be like Cognac. And those people will be able to sell their flower worldwide because it's coming at the price they were selling 20 years ago, because they will sell a quality that you cannot copy the world over.
Let's get a few more hands here. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Come on up. All right, let's keep going. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for coming. I have a question. Is it on? I have a question regarding the business regulations related. Hello? Okay. In terms of advising, I'm an attorney, and in terms of advising clients who want to get involved in this business, right now it's supposed to be set up as a nonprofit model, yet you don't get the benefit of tax exemption. There's no other, that's just telling me that the state wants to see these businesses fail. So how does the state plan on addressing how businesses are supposed to set up so that they can actually bring revenue into the economy in ways other than the black market?
I think if it were lawful, it would be just like any other lawful business in the state of California.
I think that's your answer. So let's go.
Hi, I'm Beth Allen, and my husband and I own a business in town. Our business out of town is Redgate Farm. We're a small boutique grow farm, and I am also a patient. I'm here 38 years longer than expected, and I owe that to cannabis. We also lovingly say our restaurant was built by cannabis. This community is sustained by cannabis. It is our reality. And when I hear you say trafficking, it makes my stomach in a knot, because I've lived through the wars. I've raised many children here. This is my home. And my goal is to protect it on every level. Environmentally, we donate to everything. We are a community with very little funds, and we make it all happen here. And my question is how are you going to protect us as patients, as growers, as business people, as a very thriving community that we had to, like they said, bootstrap ourselves? So thank you so much for the opportunity of this conversation.
Let me just respond to the word trafficking. What I am trying to focus on by that rather loaded word, I suppose, is the fact that even after this initiative presumably passes in California, because I think it will, we are still going to have an underground economy for a while. I hope that that's something that we can eliminate completely over time. But it is that underground piece, which I think everybody in this room, when we asked about trespass grows, expressed a desire to eliminate so that we can celebrate and support lawful, sustainable operations. It's that other piece that we're going to have to continue to focus on. And as long as there's demand throughout the country for cheap stuff, there'll probably be a challenge to address this thing that I think most in law enforcement at least will call trafficking, even after we pass this bill. But you asked about how we're going to support the sustainable local economy here, and I'll certainly open that up to anybody that wants to speak to it.
I want to comment very briefly on trafficking. We do have federal legislation. Department of Justice, in our conversations with them, say they are looking at keen interest to continue enforcement in trafficking. And so that may not be California. And we just need to be very careful what words everything gets clothed in because it has legal implications. But I do want to say that I think there's a role for California to play, and we can't control everything, but we couldn't get in a situation of permitting trafficking because that's federal law, and the Department of Justice has said they are still keen on enforcing it.
The other piece of this is that we may be on the verge of having all three West Coast states decriminalizing and legalizing marijuana, and yet technically under federal law, any commerce between those states on this substance that will be legal at the state level will be considered illegal federal trafficking. So that term, unfortunately, is going to be with us for a while. We're going to have to sort of work through the evolution of these policies. But
Let me take a step back. So, because there isn't a plan. That's why we're here, and there needs to be a plan, or I wouldn't be here. I get it. We've got to figure out a way of getting it done. The problem, the sheriff made the point, since 1996, we couldn't even figure out the damn medical thing. We're still debating it, and it's interesting. It's, a year before, it's literally weeks before there's an initiative that's being drafted that now we have a chance potentially to have a medical bill. But I won't hold your breath that that's going to get through this year. So we're going to have to go back to the voters and say, we got this thing called legalization. And they're going to say, well, hold on, you couldn't even figure out the damn medical since 1996. We don't trust you. The first thing we opened up was about trust. First speaker, I get that. And I imagine you're sitting there going, well, this guy clearly doesn't understand what we've been doing. Hell, he used the word marijuana, cannabis. So, this guy, we got work to do with Sacramento. So, look, here's what's happening as we speak. And there are a couple folks in this room that understand this because they're literally in the process of drafting the initiative. The initiative cannot answer every prescriptive question. The biggest problem with California's initiative process is when we're so prescriptive, we lose flexibility. The problem with not being prescriptive, it leaves a lot of these questions open and you wanting. And so it's a process right now of give and take. The worst thing that could happen, though, and this is my fear, is that we just do a poll-tested, focus group-driven initiative. That's bad public policy. We cannot do that. So it's trying to find that balance. So much of this and all your legitimate, substantive questions, significant, profoundly important questions, will be addressed through the implementation. The challenge for me, though, is I don't want to wait till after it passes to then begin to have these conversations. Because what happens then, I'm in Sacramento long enough to know this, the persuasion industry moves in. Folks with a bunch of money move in, and they're writing those rules and regulations. And with respect, writing a lot of you guys out. We cannot let that happen. And so that's why we're here. So we hear you, and we have to continue the conversation.
I just like it's like sort of like following Moses, trying to follow this guy. So So I just want to address the question. What are we doing to try to protect you? And I will tell you, you've got some activists that are working in Sacramento now that are bringing conversations to the Capitol that the Capitol has never seen. And the organization behind that, the ability to have meaningful conversations with members of the legislature is at an unprecedented high. And we have to continue to keep that going because it is about sustainable small farmers, and it is about keeping the jobs and keeping the product locally. It's about all of those things. And so you've got a great framework for building this now. And I will say I apologize about using the word marijuana and just say, consider us educated, quite frankly. But I will tell you, if I use the word cannabis, I got a lot of legislators who are going to look at me like, what the hell are you talking about? Education. Exactly. Education. So you've got activists, you've got people there, and you've got, more importantly, you've got people here listening to you that are going to try to carry that message as far as we possibly can. So thank you.
I want to keep us moving, but I want to share one thought that has really become clear to me just in the course of today's discussion that we've had that is responsive to the question, what are you going to do to protect us? I've heard two things that jump out to me that I'm going to urge the folks writing this initiative to consider. The first is that we absolutely cannot allow the only point of revenue sharing to be at retail, because if all the retail consumption is happening in large urban centers in Los Angeles, and those are the only places that benefit from the revenue of this industry, we're going to have all the burdens and none of the resources up here, and it's going to be a black market without any of the upside that I think many folks in this room continue to see. The other piece of it that I think is critical is to create a path forward for those who have been doing this in a legal gray area to get right with the law very quickly, and to make sure that they are not prohibited from entering the industry by any of the rules that may be in place in this initiative. So we have heard some very specific things, and I just wanted you to know that. I'm sure there are others, but let's keep going.
Hello, my name is Richard Lehman. I'm a human rights commissioner in this area, and I want to talk about children. This law is supposed to be for people that are 21 and over, but it will directly affect kids in high school and middle school. Nearly a consistent statistic has been that about 1/3 of high school kids and middle school kids admit to using marijuana, and it isn't, their brains are not fully developed and they're not mature until they're 22 years old. I get letters from I get newspaper clippings from my sister in Colorado, and I'm aware of the number of little toddlers that are rushed to emergency rooms because they've eaten edibles like brownies, things of that kind. They eat brownies and then they can't get their breath. And the panic-stricken parents are rushing their little kids to hospital emergency rooms not knowing what to do. So I hear what everybody's saying around here, but we have to think about the children. The children must be protected, especially, I'm very concerned about edibles. I think edibles ought to be locked up. If you have if you're making anything, it's an edible, it should be under lock and key so your little kids can't get into it. We used to do that when we were kids. We'd get into the cookies. We would get into the cookies when we were little. And so it's the same thing. Little kids will get into whatever looks good to them. So I would like to see edibles locked up.
Thank you, Richard. There may be some response on the issue of children from anyone?
Thank you for that comment. I can assure you everybody cares about kids. That's the one thing I've watched this issue my whole career. I've never found anyone who doesn't care about kids, no matter how they feel about whether cannabis should be legal or illegal.
Got to remember, too, that a lot of the threats to kids come from corporate behavior. If you look at the tobacco industry, there's a lot of marketing towards kids. Why is it when you go into the 7-Eleven, are there ads below where you see? That's because your kid's looking at a cigarette ad. And so I think one of the most productive things we can do that was not done with tobacco is build in really, really strong regulations designed to protect kids around things like edibles, but also around things like giveaway promotions, about tying them to events that kids enjoy, cross-promotion with products kids like. All those things have to be very, very strong, or otherwise we'll all be the losers, but certainly our kids will be losers.
My name is Daryl Cherney. Been an Earth First activist most of my life. Helped start the campaign to save Headwaters Forest, and also more recently have a no rat poison yard sign campaign following the footsteps of Murat Gabriel and both his example and his sacrifice. The history of the world represents a war against small farmers. Not just here in the United States, but across the entire global history. Peasants have been uprooted from their lands. Small farmers have been shut down. And I see that as a strong possibility happening here. Regulation. This is what regulation means to me. As a forest activist, the California Department of Forestry, the California Board of Forestry, the most heavily regulated forestry system in the country. And what do you get? Clear cuts, destroyed streams, endangered species, extirpation, dead animals everywhere, and streams silted up and floods all over the place. That is what regulation sometimes means. It does not. I don't think we need so much regulation as we need protection. And it doesn't mean that they have to be mutually exclusive. But I just want to make the point that it's not regulation for regulation's sake. We need to have something that protects small farmers as well. All the cannabis legislation that I've seen across the United States has, had exorbitant application fees. Illinois wants $25,000 just to apply, non-refundable, and then many hundreds of thousands just to get your permit. And so I think that if you're looking at the encouragement of indoor growing as the norm, pollution extraordinaire. So, and I could go on tying marijuana growing to county code building ordinances that would cost the average homeowner hundreds of thousands of dollars to comply. I think these are the kinds of things that we don't want to see here. My question. So I'm going to get to my question, but I want to indicate that cannabis has a culture to it. There's songs. I've written quite a few of them myself. There are songs, there's clothing, there's language, there's a whole culture that comes along with it. And I think that culture is not going to go away no matter what happens in the state level, but I think it needs to be understood that this is a cultural phenomenon, not just a cannabis phenomenon. And so my question is, what kind of regulations do you see, or what kind of regulations do you want to not see regarding promoting indoor growing, promoting exorbitant fees, promoting things that I think at the end of the day are going to encourage an underground economy to flourish rather than prevent? That's my question.
No, I mean, this is exactly what we're trying to figure out. And I hate to sound redundant, but I'll continue to sound redundant when posed with those specific questions. This is why we're out here. I agree with you. Once you establish a fee, it only goes one direction. That's up. And so all those things are legitimate points of view and concern. I appreciate the point of view about culture. I think that's incredibly important. And the issue of protections. To your point, this happened on our watch with all those regulations, the examples you used as it relates to our forests. So regulation's not good enough. It's got to have a spirit of protection. And so I think those are all fine points. And we had two town halls. We had a big one on kids in Oakland, and this was expressed over and over and over again. Gummy bears and those jelly beans that are targeted to kids, the concerns, some examples in Colorado. All those things are legit points. But it was interesting. In our first town hall in L.A., everyone was all about indoor. That's the answer. Yeah, exactly. So I'm just saying, that's why there's 58 counties and California is not one size fits all. So all this is very, very helpful, and I just want to acknowledge that feedback is not something that's lost on us, and we're going to process it.
You know, all due respect to you, Daryl, and what you had to say. Am I on? Okay. But I think we need to frame this discussion a little bit, too. I understand what you're saying about regulation. I think there has to be something really set in stone as to how it's going to be regulated. But we're talking about an industry that wants to come out of the shadows. You're asking government to step in and legitimize an industry. There's going to have to be some regulation. There's no industry that is not regulated. And I agree, some of it is regulated, but it is skewed in many different ways. I get that. But I think we need to understand that if we're going to legitimize or bring out of the gray area a true industry to California, there's going to have to be some regulation. There's going to have to be, and I think that's what you're asking for. I just want to make sure that we understand that, because it's not only for the protection of the producer, but it's also for the protection of those that are utilizing the product. I'll tell you right now, again, I've been in this business on the other end for 30 years. I've seen what goes into a lot of these, for your sake, I'll say cannabis, but I'm probably going to still call it marijuana. But I've seen what goes into these plants. I have a legitimate concern as to what is being used to produce this product, the insecticides, the rodenticides. This is a very porous plant, takes a lot of water, takes a lot of nutrients. So there has to be some regulation, too, to protect the consumer. But again, my issues here are production.
I think you folks have begun to figure out the line thing, and you've jumped ahead of me, and I see a long line. So in the interest of using the time that we have left, and we hope to have everybody out of here at 2:30, we'll just proceed along the line that you have so nicely formed. All right. Yeah, Luke wants to jump in.
If I can just jump in on this issue quickly, that was great, Daryl. Thank you. You know, you brought up the thing in Illinois and other states where they want $2 million in a surety bond. Like, that's ever going to happen. You know, one of the things I think is very helpful for us, the Lieutenant Governor is gathering information here. Keith is gathering information so they can take this out. And I think we as a community need to explain to them why there doesn't need to be hundreds of thousands of dollars of surety bonds and upfront fees to fund their system. If you will so permit me, sir, can I ask a question of the crowd? Who here wants to pay their taxes? Thank you.
I think we got a room full of Democrats here is what we got.
Hi, my name is Tom Grover. I've worked with many environmental groups on not only the cannabis issue, but living in a rural place and taking care of the environment. One of the main things I've been working on for years and years and now has been water storage, water permits, which is probably the major impact that we're having. The cannabis farmers and the local residents and everybody else, we're using up all the water, and we need to store it and all that good stuff. But if what you're doing doesn't upgrade the State Water Resource Water Rights Division, now you have lots of enforcement officers who are coming out, no disrespect meant to anyone, but coming out with armed officers when you could send somebody a letter and ask them, you may not need a permit for your water. But the State Water Rights Division is broken. It doesn't work. It doesn't have enough people to process these forms. Locally, we don't have the people to go through, as was pointed out by one of the water resource guys. Each case is an individual case. And so it's going to take a lot of manpower. It's going to take a lot on the local level. We've already exhausted the local resources. But if the Water Rights Division doesn't work, none of the permits will be able to be granted. None of the people will be able to get legalized. So I'd just like you to consider that, because you're putting a lot of energy into enforcement, which is necessary. But if you don't follow it up with protecting people's water rights as well as the fish, it's not going to work. Thank you so much.
Hello. Oh, hello. My name is David Bush. I'm an environmental attorney and a marijuana attorney. I am in Sonoma County, but I just opened an office in Denver, and I left you all a memo comparing Colorado and California. I left out Washington shortly after I started because we're not going to follow Washington. They're not Californians. It ain't happening. So, besides, they chose the Liquor Control Board, and Denver chose the Department of Health, which is a much better choice. Liquor Control Board out, health in. All right. Since Oakland, I'm a BRC groupie. I've been to all these public meetings. I was in the UCLA and Oakland. And since Oakland, and by the way, Lieutenant Governor Newsom, fantastic way to chair the meeting. Way to go. The bishop asked a question that has become my mantra, even with my criminal clients, which is, how is legalizing marijuana going to help the children of East Oakland? Right? Every step of the way, I ask myself that question. How is this going to help the children of East Oakland? Okay, there's a spiritual side to marijuana that's going to draw you into something that you were not expecting, no matter what. I don't care what you think. Marijuana is spiritual. Quick props to Prop 215. In 1996, especially, Sheriff, if you remember 1996, marijuana was not legal anywhere, and a bunch of hippie lawyers got together to make it legal across the world, and they are succeeding. It is outdated, for sure, but it was unique, and it should be recognized for what it is. With all due respect to Brownie Mary, here comes the bad news to the marijuana side. Edibles cannot be candy. They can't be brownies. I'll tell you why. I have a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old, and an 11-year-old. And if you think you can keep my daughter Olivia away from candy, I'd like to see the container. Okay? If it looks like candy, they're going to eat it. We don't need it to look like candy. Yes, it's easier for patients to take it that way, but you know what the easiest thing in the world is a sublingual dissolving strip. All right? Easier to produce. You lose all. Hey, with edibles, I say this all the time, you have to put nutrients on them. Just because you infuse marijuana into your edible doesn't mean you're exempt from federal labeling laws for food, okay? And it's a $175 test. Okay, I hate leaving without the solution. I got the solution to the whole thing, right? Because of federal law conflict that it is, we should take advantage of that as the state of California. The banking system based on debt is going out. It's non-sustainable, as we see around the world. We should go to a state bank that's commodity-based, and guess what that commodity should be? More expensive than gold, twice the price of gold, and you got it. Marijuana, commodity-based state bank. There you go.
Gavin, I'm guessing in all your meetings you haven't heard a proposal to move us to the cannabis standard.
All right, My name is Casey O'Neill. I'm a small vegetable farmer, cannabis farmer. And as a child of this community, and as a farmer, I see that we have rules and regulations that are built to deal with farmers. As a vegetable farmer, I go to the Department of Ag. I pay my permit for the things I produce. I tell them exactly which ones I produce, and then I'm legal to sell those things. So we're talking about, well, how are we going to regulate this? We have a department that deals with farmers. On the retail end, that's another story, and I'm open to whatever regulations, what our retail partners need. But for us as farmers, we need the Department of Agriculture. We need a tiered licensing system that supports different scales of cultivation. And we need an incremental approach so that we can phase this thing in. We can have permit before compliance so that if I say I'm going to do the right thing and I talk to the land use consultant and demonstrate, like, this is my plan to do the right thing, then we should be able to continue to cultivate as we have, and we should be able to work this out under the Department of Ag. So my question is, what is the holdup from getting us into Department of Ag? As a farmer, the idea, and no offense meant, but the idea that I would relate with law enforcement for the cultivation of my crop is inherently repugnant, and I need to be regulated by the Department of Agriculture. So I'd like to know what's the holdup to getting there?
So this is a major question that needs to be answered, is what is that sort of governmental arm that will oversee this. And a lot of good people, I mean, it's Department of Health folks out there says absolutely health. Others saying, you're making the point on an egg, and others saying, no, it has to be something familiar that exists, which is, God bless, the alcohol beverage control. And so, exactly. So your opinion's noted. This has to be, this is a big debate, and this has to be addressed. This can't be silent in the initiative. So this is something that has to be figured out very, very quickly.
Hi, my name's Marianne Lyons. I represent Sunbelt Farms. We're a small medicinal cooperative here in Humboldt County. One thing, as everybody here knows, if you go anywhere in the world, nobody's going to say California grown. They're going to say Humboldt grown. So you have a very rare opportunity in the state of California to recognize that we are the premier name brand in the entire world. And I think that that's kind of important. I have been trying to follow the steps towards legalization. I spoke with Fiona Ma, who told me to get a seller's permit. I can't tell you what I've gone through to try to get a seller's permit. You go online, and so working on all the different processes for us to even try to do it as medicinal cooperative is difficult. So it'd be great to streamline that. When you're talking about how much it's going to cost for people to get their licenses, I always follow this mantra: a fast penny's quicker than a slow dime any day. There's over 10,000 medicinal marijuana farmers already in the state of California, if not 50,000. So how do we pull them into the process? I think streamlining it. The thing that, Jared, you already covered, so I'm here to thank you for saying we need an excise tax. The marijuana is going out of Humboldt County, but nothing's coming back to Humboldt County. So the counties that are selling the marijuana are making money, and nothing's coming back to Humboldt to help with the environment. We need that. I also think it's very important that we recognize the heritage rights, and I hope that you're doing something while you're writing up this hopefully perfect thing that I can promote and work on, because if anybody knows me, I'm definitely a big political activist. Heritage rights, it's really important that you recognize that people that have been growing for multiple generations have heritage rights. So just like the Alaskan Indians, how can they get back their territory to fish on? How do we keep our heritage rights here and do that and not lose money doing it? And that's about it. Just thanks, you guys.
Hi, I'm Karen Byers, and I've been a marijuana advocate since 1990 when I came out here for Redwood Summer from Texas and ran into Operation Green Sweep. I was really amazed at what I saw, and so I've been really just mesmerized by it ever since. And to see this day come that we're actually sitting here talking about this is just a good day for me. So I want to let you know what I think is important as we move forward, that there can be no more nonviolent prisoners concerning marijuana. And you'll see me go back and forth using marijuana and cannabis. I say marijuana when it comes to the oppression. I say cannabis when I talk about the future. So that's my description of that. And that marijuana prisoners, nonviolent marijuana prisoners, are released. And people that have those charges have a way to get those charges expunged. And that they can be fully participate in this as we move forward. My second is that adult use cannot interfere with medical marijuana. Medical marijuana rights have to stay at the forefront of everything we say. And we move forward, we say, how is this going to affect the patients when we move forward for adult use? And then my next is that we have reasonable regulations that protect the environment as we move forward. Like, again, I moved out here for Redwood Summer. I came out here as an environmentalist. Those things are still very important to me. So I'm thrilled to see the different agencies at the table so that we are doing that. And then the next is that we always have to retain our right to self-provide. That can never be taken away from us, and that's happening in other states, so it's not a non-issue. That we always have our rights to self-provide, and that we joined the American Herbal Products Association and Americans for Safe Access, who has come up with a standard for dispensing, growing, and testing marijuana. It's been focused on medical marijuana, but I bet it'll cross over quite easily into adult use. For me to put this in the hands of the herbal industry is important, and American Herbal Products Association has been regulating all herbal products since 1986. It could set a national standard, and it could take a lot of this out of the way. And I did have a chance to take their dispensing in their beta test, and so I'm certified to sell marijuana. That's kind of cool, anyways. And then I just worked for 3 years out of Santa Fe on their program in New Mexico. I had a chance to experience vertical integration. I can tell you that that is not a good system, so please don't even consider it. Their program was led by the Department of Health, and that was really fun not to have a gun in the room. So anyways, nothing personal, but it was really nice. And yeah. And so then just my last is I just enjoy hearing y'all say, I get that. And thank you for taking the time to come here and get that. And that I was in San Francisco while you were mayor, and I was there the night you lit up the Capitol pink because sex equal rights had passed. And so I want to be with you and you light up the Capitol green in Sacramento. And we look forward to that day.
Thank you, folks. So I just want to let some folks know we've only got about another 5 minutes, and then I just want to do a couple of closing remarks at the end. So with apologies, we're not going to get to everybody in the line. We're going to maybe get a couple more. But I did want to repeat something I heard earlier from Keith, that there is a feedback mechanism at safeandsmartpolicy.org. I suspect all of you are going to be logging into that before this day is over to make sure that the Blue Ribbon Commission has your feedback if you weren't able to share it today. But let's keep going and get as many as we can. We're nearing the end, though.
Hi, my name is Lisa Molyneux, and I'm here from Santa Cruz County, which we also grow in. And so what happens here affects us. But I can tell you that a lot of our growers, I have run a dispensary in Santa Cruz, a lot of our growers do come from this region. And I think, well, two things very quickly. I think state law allows for concentrates. SB 420 says all derivatives of cannabis are allowed. And travel. Our dispensary 3 years ago instituted a letter for travel that was formed by our attorney. And at the time that they're coming, we fax this form to them, and it states everything they're carrying. And they have been stopped on the road before, and it's held up because they call and confirm with us that that's a true letter. We use our corporate seal, so it's not actually something they can, it's a copy at that point. But I am really interested in keeping the medical side of cannabis as California, I think all of California is. I would suggest that we come up with something in the legislature that just taxes it lower than the recreational. And I think that in my dispensary, the mom and pop growers tend to be the ones that grow our specific medical strains. Our larger growers also do, but the mom and pops mean a lot, and I don't want to see them go away. I've said the same thing in Santa Cruz County to our supervisors. But I just want to also say that when California goes recreational, the other states aren't going to matter. This is the cannabis state. So I would suggest that we embrace it and take advantage of that and not push it away. So, because I think a lot of our growers, knowing it or not, are supporting the other states. So a lot of our cannabis probably leaves this state. So I would rather see it controlled where the state is getting something from it. So that's all I had to say.
Hi, my name is Crystal Ray, and I came with a carload of folks from Mendocino County. And the other county that also feels they have a good brand. I also represent an organization called Women Grow. And as chapter chair of Women Grow in Mendocino County, I'm familiar with many young women who have grown up in the field, so to speak, second and third generation, actually including my own daughter. And I'm also a certified herbalist, and I've been running a wellness center out in the middle of nowhere for over 15 years. And what I would really like to share with you guys is this conversation about the kids. And as a grandmother and medicine maker, I do know that there is a place for that in my family first aid chest. I would never, ever, ever allow that medicine to be ingested by my children or my grandchildren. That is a really inappropriate use. So I would really like to say that a few bad players shouldn't ruin it for the rest of us who are highly educated and skilled at dispensing that. I'm also a medicine maker. So I'm curious, as we shape these regulations and I create a topicals business for myself, how can I be guaranteed to actually have enough material to run my business? So for example, right now, I run out of material about halfway through the year, and I have to tell all my clients, sorry, no more medicine. So how can I be guaranteed to actually make enough medicine for all of my clients? And when you're medicine making, it takes more material. We're not smoking or using flowers. We're actually making topical extracts. I'm also an aromatherapist, and I'm leading the way on making creams that are THC-free. And I think this is really significant for the panel to understand. There's many ways to make this medicine. And making THC-free medicine makes it more accessible for more people, including the skin of our children. So please don't make it illegal for us mothers and grandmothers to use this medicine with our children, because it's really had a place. It's amazing for healing herpes, for example, through a topical, no THC. So allow us to try to bring this conversation of quantity for medicine making into the conversation, because it's just nowhere. I haven't seen any conversation about it. I don't know how my needs are going to be addressed. Thank you.
Well, okay.
I feel guilty.
Let's go real quick.
Quick.
Hi, I'm Wendy. I'm the founder of Space Jam Candy. I make edibles, and I just hear a lot of negative things about the edibles, about the candy, about this, about that. You know, I use ice water hash, and I just want to say that this is what I do. This is what I'm brought here to do. And, you know, just because it's colorful, like no kids have gotten it, we can keep our dosage low and regulate it, but people really need this medicine, and we can't just say that we're going to come up with this one thing for people to put under their tongue and that's going to work for them. There's tons of different ways we can put THC in our body. Gummies is one of the best ways to get vitamins through your system, and so is marijuana and cannabis, ice water hash. So I just want to say I'm the edible maker, so I have a kid myself, and I just wanted to, I heard a lot of negative things, and I haven't had any of those issues, and it is kept away and put away, and thank you.
Joshua Drake here. I'd just like to thank everybody, the activists and everything, and congressmen, and senators, for putting it on the ballot and letting it pass, letting the people vote on it. I appreciated that. I'm from Nevada, northeastern corner of Nevada, and I've seen what Lehigh Lilly has done with their oxycodone and all their crap, and people smoking it, and talk about kids, you know, getting little ones hooked on that stuff, you know, and regulations. And I got a boy that's got epilepsy real bad, and that's all I wanted to say, you know. It's just, you know, it's kind of screwed up our world in a way, but, and please recycle, you know.
Well, folks, we have reached the end. We could have gone on a lot longer, but again, I hope you all wrote down safeandsmartpolicy.org because this dialogue will continue. I want to give Assemblymember Jim Wood a chance to say thanks and any final thoughts he has.
Well, I just want to say thank you for coming out. Thank you for the information. We'll take it back. I've been working with the legislature to try to bring awareness to cannabis now, not marijuana. So thank you for being here. We're taking it to heart, and we really appreciate the warm welcome here in Garberville.
Thank you, Jim. And on my behalf, I just want to thank all of you. Representing this area for the last 2.5 years has really informed me as I go back and try to work on the federal aspect of this policy challenge and the opportunities that we face. Today took me a little further along the learning curve. So there's so many lessons and accumulated knowledge on this here in Humboldt and Mendocino and Trinity County. I get that as your representative, but now a bunch of other people get it too. And I just want you to join me in thanking Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom and his colleagues from the Blue Ribbon Task Force. And hang on, because I'm going to give the Lieutenant Governor the last word here.
Everyone's standing up. You're ready to go. Thank you all very much. Thank you for your insight. Thank you for your perspective. And just want to close by saying this is not the end of the conversation. It's just the beginning. Thank you all very, very much.
All right, that is the close of this public policy forum. Again, that was Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom. Sherry, what did you think of that forum?
Well, I think it was really informative. And actually, I think the Lieutenant Governor summed it up at the end. This is just the beginning. A lot of questions were raised, not a whole lot of answers, but it gives them a lot of information to take back to the state legislature and work on. And I think that was accomplished. There were so many standing ovations, which listeners couldn't see, but several times the whole room was standing and clapping. You could hear the applause, I'm sure. And also, you could tell by the temperature of the room how many people are here. It's nearly sweltering. And there, I would say at least 500 people were here.
It is packed. Yeah, people were really jammed in. Obviously, we could have went on for hours. There was a line out the door that was just, halted because of the time frame for some of the representatives to travel. So once again, everybody, the progress report issued in March by the Blue Ribbon Commission on Marijuana Policy is the framework that lines this discussion. You can see that document on the KMUD website, kmud.org. In the back is that website that they mentioned where the public can still give feedback to all of these representatives and specifically the Blue Ribbon Commission on Marijuana Policy. What is that website again, Sherry?
The website is safeandsmartpolicy.org, and to send an email, it is info@safeandsmartpolicy.org. I have to send a shout out to Mendocino County. It was good to see a contingent here.
That was really exciting. Mendocino County was well represented. I mean, hardly anybody in the audience got to talk. And, some people from Humboldt did speak, some people from Mendocino, and supervisors and other representatives from Mendocino County and Trinity were here. And they actually were part of the morning private session. So listeners might have gleaned the fact that this morning, for many hours, different picked stakeholders met with the representatives, and now this afternoon was the public forum where everybody could stream in and give comments and recommendations for the initiative language.
And I thought something for me that was interesting to learn about the butane canisters that are being found in the hills around here. And can you talk about that? Is that a significant problem in here in Humboldt County?
Well, I think like the audience alluded to, that's a problem all over the state. Because growing and cultivating and producing is still murky for many, marijuana growers, cannabis growers, also manufacturers of products. There's also no clear disposal. And there's a shame element where how do you take 500 butane canisters to your local dump and not feel weird? So it's a major point of contention in our neck of the woods because people then, if they have property, they just stack it up on their property. And, in their minds, they're doing a good thing by putting it all in one place. But, we've dealt with multiple explosions in Northern California because people who are manufacturing concentrated cannabis don't have a safe place, don't have, certified kitchens. If you have a restaurant, you're manufacturing any sort of value-added product, you have a certified kitchen where it's all straightforward, what you do, the regulations, that doesn't exist so far. So we really need to get everybody on board to make it safer for both the growers, the manufacturers, and the public.
Right, and also I thought water would have been touched on a little bit more today, but it certainly was brought up.
Yeah, water, I think because in Humboldt County, I can't speak to Mendocino, but literally we talk about water every single day here. And on our news, we talk about water almost every day right now. And literally yesterday, there were enforcement agents in Sproul Creek drainage. So it's just such a prevalent thing in Humboldt that I think it was kind of neglected in this discussion, which was really interesting.
Right.
That's good you noticed that. I'm in the, everyday mode, so I was like, oh, wow. It is interesting. Nobody really brought that up.
There was a recent meeting in Laytonville with the water board, and they were addressing that they were going to be out visiting grow sites and seeing if people were how close they were to water, if they were affecting groundwater, and how close they were to streams. And I'm wondering if that's happening, if you're hearing if grows are actually being visited by these water board regulators.
Oh, yeah. Just this week, the State Water Board sent out enforcement agents along with Department of Fish and Wildlife. They were actually in Sproul Creek drainage starting in April, which is in southern Humboldt. And then just this week, they went further into Sproul Creek, into Jones Creek, and into Indian Creek. I just interviewed the Chief Enforcement Officer for the State Water Board. That interview will be on tonight. That's Chris Kerrigan, and he talked about their actions, what they're talking to growers about, but just rural property owners as well. They're focusing on drainages that have went dry, and Sproul Creek went dry for the last 2 years. There's a lot of finger pointing on why that happened, but it happened. So that's also supposed to be a coho-bearing stream. So they're focusing on places that are supposed to have endangered fish population, and they're supposed to have water, and those are the focal points for now. He did say, I asked Chris Kerrigan, with State Water Board today, could you disclose your route? Where are you going next? And he said, we are going to finish up in Sproul Creek and keep contact with those landowners. Then we're going to go to northern Mendocino County. And then he said, we're going to focus further north after that in Humboldt County. Okay. So he did address the fact that Mendocino County is an issue. He did not say specifically what watershed, but he said they are headed there sooner than later.
Okay.
Yeah. That's a great question. And yeah, everybody's wondering, they do want a roadmap of enforcement. But really, he said, as we get more and more money for enforcement, it's going to be everywhere. So they are really stressing this whole voluntary compliance issue where, all the permits are on their website. You can initiate the process if you want beforehand, which has been really interesting to follow in our neighborhoods because there is if I get my water rights before my neighbor, I legally have the right to the water that's becoming more scarce because of the ongoing drought. So that's been really interesting to talk to people in different watersheds and get the reasons they're filing for their water rights.
And I got the sense here in Humboldt that, at least in this crowd, that they're not so shy of regulation. and is that the sense that you see in the community?
Well, I think that there's been a super negative attitude about regulation for a long, long time. You did hear one of the speakers very articulately say that if you look at the forestry model for regulation, and if you just look at the fact that all the hills were clear cut and that the streams were filled with sediment and literally miles of people's private property were then flooded with sediment, flooded with water because of the logging practices of the past couple of decades, there's not a lot of faith that regulation will fix anything. And, the whole trust that kept being brought up, what is trust between the public and the agencies? And it's just something that, is really difficult to swallow for a lot of people because a lot of the small growers in our area will tell you that they are environmental champions. And so there's just this huge disconnect between a lot of the rhetoric we hear and maybe in the other meetings that even Lieutenant Governor Newsom has held. If you listen to the audio from the meeting that he had in Southern California and other state water board meetings, even the North Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board meeting that they had in Eureka, literally it was language like the prohibition language, and they talked about them, marijuana growers as them, and we were in the same county as the meeting. So it's just the villainizing of the grower is still happening, and so that really puts people off from regulation, and that's becoming more of a public dialogue. But because people do champion themselves as environmentalists, they're getting on board with the regulation. So it's this really interesting, literally week-by-week change. And I think it's really neat. I'm sure lots of people will write books about it, in the future. What changed and when, and how did the general attitude change? It was really cool. Did you hear the Humboldt State University professor speak? I don't remember what number and line he was, but he is the head of the HIIMR, the Humboldt Interdisciplinary Marijuana Research Center at HSU, and he and other professors have been following the sociology of exactly what you brought up.
Right, and I thought also an interesting point or time during the panel was, I believe it was Huffman who said that Woods said that it was difficult actually to get their fellow legislators to listen to them and to listen to what's happening and to consider these issues here in this part of the state. And so hopefully this forum today will really help propel it further.
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, it's just because it has been such a industry under the cover or whatever you want to call it, and people really are championing bringing it into the light. And so, I think that other industries see it as huge competition, so I'm sure that plays into the rhetoric. this supposedly, as mentioned, there's not a lot of actual data, and that's something that's lacking in the banking industry. But there's been one report out of Humboldt that said it's more than $1 billion every year just cash marijuana. And so just the fact that it's such a competitive industry with, for instance, ag or the vineyards, or if marijuana becomes legalized in all these different ways, how will that compete with the benefits they get, the subsidies? Nobody's even said, oh, do marijuana farmers get subsidies? I don't know.
Right. Well, definitely times are changing and moving forward probably at a much higher rate here of speed. And I wanted to give you that email address again. It's safeandsmartpolicy.org, and to send an email to comment on their policy progress report, actually, on the Blue Ribbon Commission on Marijuana Policy. You can email them at info@safeandsmartpolicy.org, or you can go to their website at safeandsmartpolicy.org.
That's right. And we're actually going to throw it back to the KMUD studios. Super thank you, Sherry Quinn from KZYX&Z in Mendocino County. It's been really nice to work with you.
You too. It's been great to be here. I actually feel like a sports newscaster for the first time in my life. I don't know.
I know. This was such a sporting event. There were lots of ups and downs, cheering, jumping.
Exactly.
Bapping of the microphone.
A lot of energy in the room. Hopefully you heard it.
That's right. Thank you so much to all of our listeners. And Sydney and Zach at KMUD, can you hear us? How's it going?